Welcome to University Utara Malaysia. I am Dr. Al-Maliki. Today, we are examining the specific legal distinction between a security professional and a criminal hacker. In this field, a single piece of paper documenting permission is the primary factor that determines if an action is an act of defense or a felony. The software and techniques used by both groups are identical. Running a vulnerability scan or bypassing a firewall are morally neutral actions. To understand the ethics of cybersecurity, we have to look past the code and examine the human motivation behind the keyboard. This 2x2 matrix categorizes hackers based on two specific axes: intent and permission. A black hat hacker operates with malicious intent and zero permission. A white hat hacker operates with defensive intent and explicit permission from the system owner. The complexity arises when we add the gray hat to this matrix. A gray hat may hack a system to expose a flaw or protest a perceived injustice. Their intent might be noble, but because the gray hat falls into the same column as the black hat, operating without explicit consent, their actions cross a hard legal boundary and are classified as a crime. This split-screen diagram highlights a penetration tester's legal shield, the scope of work contract. When a company hires a white hat, this legally binding document dictates exactly what they can and cannot target. It explicitly divides the targeted retail servers from the off-limits internal network. The gray area opens up when the tester discovers a path connecting that approved server to an out-of-scope payroll system. Looking closely at the data, the tester realizes it holds GDPR-protected personal information. Touching that server violates the contract and risks massive legal penalties for mishandling sensitive data. For the students watching, what is your next move? You cannot ignore the flaw, but probing it further is a crime. As this flowchart shows, modern industry practice requires radical transparency. You take 3 steps: stop the test immediately, document the exact flaw, and report it to the client. Now consider the independent researcher. This timeline graph illustrates their ethical standard: coordinated vulnerability disclosure. When a researcher finds a critical flaw in consumer hardware, they discreetly notify the manufacturer and grant them 90 days to issue a patch before making the flaw public. But look at the company action line. It remains completely flat. The company ignores the report. When that clock hits 0, the researcher is forced down 2 diverging paths. They can issue a consumer warning to protect the public, but doing so exposes them to retaliation, including lawsuits under the Computer Fraud and Abuse Act. Systemic surveillance creates a different set of ethical problems. This flowchart visualizes function creep. A system initially built for physical security, like a lobby camera, gets connected to AI analysis and eventually expands into monitoring the lunch habits of employees. The original justifiable purpose quietly morphs into invasive surveillance. We saw a stark example of this in 2015. Following a data breach, the University of California covertly installed monitoring devices on its campus networks to analyze internet traffic for threats. Bypassing transparency and faculty consent, the university's defense measures directly infringed on academic freedom and privacy. The tension between institutional security and privacy escalated dramatically in 2016. Following a terrorist attack, the FBI demanded that Apple write a specialized piece of software to bypass the lock screen on the attacker's iPhone. Mathematically, it is impossible to create a backdoor reserved for law enforcement. A bypass built for one device can be stolen or duplicated. Once leaked, this vulnerability compromises the data protection on all similar devices, leaving millions of users exposed to the same threats the government aims to prevent. Hacktivists operate under the belief that digital civil disobedience is justified to fight corruption. However, the law relies strictly on the principle of consent. Targeting a network without authorization is illegal, regardless of the political or social motivation driving the attack. The moral ambiguity here is deep. A vigilante group might successfully shut down a criminal scam ring targeting the elderly, yet operating without oversight means there are no guardrails. A poorly aimed attack on a corporate server can easily bleed into critical infrastructure, causing severe collateral damage to hospitals or power grids. At the highest tier of cybersecurity, we find nations hacking other nations. Actions that would result in life sentences for ordinary citizens are routinely carried out by governments under the justification of national security. State intelligence agencies operate on a massive scale, utilizing cyber tools for bulk data collection. The ethical conflict arises when governments deploy these tools inwardly, collecting vast amounts of data and effectively treating entire populations of citizens as suspects without individual warrants. The disclosures made by Edward Snowden confirmed the extent of this warrantless surveillance. Today, the debate continues as legislators introduce bills such as the Earn It Act, which critics argue are designed to undermine strong end-to-end encryption in consumer products entirely. This forces us to confront a difficult question. If state-sponsored protectors operate entirely outside the law to conduct mass surveillance and espionage, how does society differentiate them from the threats they are tasked with stopping? For the computer science students here at UUM, your technical capabilities will continue to grow. You will learn to bypass firewalls and identify zero-day vulnerabilities. But your technical skill is only the tool. Your ethical framework is the variable that defines your professional legacy. This graphic maps out your rules of engagement. Ethical cybersecurity relies on 3 pillars. First, permission serves as your strict legal shield. Second, transparency dictates how you document and report your findings. And third, integrity ensures you protect the data you uncover. As fields like AI and quantum computing evolve, the gray areas we discussed today will rapidly expand. It is the collective duty of the next generation of engineers to ensure that our future technical innovations remain anchored to these ethical foundations.